Who's doing it? Who's doing the intro? Are we live?
We are live.
Oh, okay.
Oh. Welcome everyone for Octant community meeting for June 23. Thank you to everyone who's joining now and everyone who's watching the recording. Remember that we have an open agenda, so please go there and add your name. This is especially useful for persons who are watching the recording of the session, so they can know who's who in the call. So for today we have a really nice agenda, so I hope we can do it on time. So first topic is release 21 is lips in this past week. So congratulations to the team for this. Thank you for all your hard work. It's a really nice release with several new features, which are there in the changelog. We will recap some of this. So I will ask please Sam to do a quick recap for us and for the community of what's new in this release.
Cool. I'll take it away from here then. All right, let me pull up Octant and share my screen. Sure, see my whole desktop. All right, so this is what Octant looks like. Let's go into our release information. Let's see the unreleased changes. Or really I should have clicked 0.21, huh? Oh, this actually navigates me in the browser. That's kind of awkward. Okay, well, here's what I'll do. Let's get out of you. Come back here. And let's go here to our changelogs. Here we are. So I got half the screen on Octant, the other half on these releases and large things to go through. So there are a few items up here which are of interest. The first one, I'm not going to go through the forms. I think Milan's going to show the resource viewers. I think the main highlight here is to show the local path to kubeconfig. So mainly you can pretty much see this. I believe it's in preferences. So we go this preference path. Now you get this home.kubeconfig, and yeah, this is just a nice addition where you can essentially know right away where Octant is trying to look for your kubeconfig or multiple kubeconfigs. There is, yeah, go with some of the other changes going through here are the managed fields. So if we go into, say, an arbitrary pod. I don't have a pod here, so maybe I'll go into like a cert manager since I was looking at that earlier. Watch it spin. Here's a cert manager pod. And let's see if the YAML, so this YAML no longer has the managed fields, but if we come to the metadata, we can see the managed fields are now removed from this YAML and reduces the noise. We have this select file component. So if we go to something like a control Y. We have this thing that just lets you open stuff and close things and apply. And essentially, you can open a YAML file here. And then add support for CDS cards for alerts modals. So this one is more of a clarity thing. Essentially, we add, so instead of having only just a global alert, now we have alerts that are just available as consumption for multiple places. So an example of this would be something like, let me hide this a little bit here. In fact, this is covering the screen. So it would look something like, I have this pod, and let's say I delete it. Now this CDS alert is available here within this card, and we just made this available as part of the components that people can consume. And add tabs as components, that's pretty straightforward. So essentially tabs themselves are now first class components. So you could theoretically add a tab inside this Flex layout, or you can use the previous API through the plugins and add additional tabs out here. So you could do all sorts of crazy stuff like nested tabs. But if it ever gets that weird, kind of all bets are off and you're kind of on your own there. So that's a brief overview. I didn't touch any of the resource viewer things, so I can hand that off since Milan's been working on it.
Cool. Thank you so much, Sam. There was a feature there that here in the call is Todd Rosenberg. Thank you for joining. He is one of our longtime users, and I know he was waiting for the kubeconfig path feature. So I hope you will find it useful stuff. So thank you, Sam. And I don't know if Scott, you want to comment something?
No, it's awesome that it's there. It's really helpful, especially on Windows where it's hard to know where it's saved. So definitely awesome to have that.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead, please, with Milan. He's going to show us some of the new features in the resource viewer.
Before you start, I had a quick question about the YAML viewer. The apply or the browse for file, does that get shown when you start up Octant without a kube config to let you browse and select a kube config?
I believe it does.
Okay, cool.
I mean, it's part of the YAML editor, so it should show up whenever that model shows up.
Got it. Okay, so we added it. Yeah. Okay. Great. Excellent.
Right.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you, Sam and David. A lot of exciting features, exciting release. I just wanted to show briefly the resource viewer, and I mean, I showed most of those features at the time they were developed, mostly to get some feedback, but now since they're released, it's a good time to go back and show them. And I will display something that we usually don't demo, and that's web hooks that contain different components. So it's a little different resources. So it's a little easier to show the variety of changes we have in this release. So here's my webhook, and if I click on the resource viewer, this is a relatively complex view, and we are doing some work right now to make this simple. But in this release, one of the changes is that when you open this view, the resource you are viewing will always be selected, which is important for, it's a small change, but it's important for multiple reasons. It highlights that selection, it highlights what you're working on, but also it automatically shows the properties on the right side. That's another feature that's new in this release. For each resource, we will display a list of properties, and that list varies depending on the type of resource. So the one we see right now is out-of-the-box default that shows for every resource. In this case, this is a custom resource that we don't have much more information. So we only show the version kind. Since this is a cluster scoped, there's no namespace and created. You can see right away that those are components on the right side. So for example, the created is a timestamp component. And in the future, I can envision in some other places we display links, but in future, those components might be maybe spark charts or progress controls when we have those, or any other component for that matter. So for different resources, for example, for services, we try to highlight the most important things about that resource. So service, it's obviously important what kind of resource it is, and session affinity, and so on. For config maps, we don't have it. For example, for stateful sets, we show the number of replica sets and pod management policy and so on. I don't want to go into many details. We also display for pods, for example, that are pretty important resources. We display service account and node it's running on, what is controlled by. We also display last event in case there are any, and I can't show that here, but I'll show it in some other place. But before that, you see this last field. That's another way to show the stuff in the properties. This can come from a plugin as well. And I have this sample plugin that registered for this, and it's displaying the ID, just for example. So you can see that properties can be controlled on multiple levels, and they're configurable and they're accessible from plugins. And let me just quickly show one other thing. So we have here one application that has some issues. Let's see how Resource Viewer can help us diagnose that. Once it loads. I don't know what's going on with Zoom, but yeah, every time I run things and some things are so slow. So you can see that there are some errors with this deployment, and in this case, we are showing the last event, and that quickly illustrates what's going on. There is a image pullback of errors. So this will help diagnosing and troubleshooting errors. One other thing I wanted to show is this properties pane now can be resized. So a lot of times you can't see all the stuff here, so you can quickly resize it and see the details. That's a lot of thoughts. Yeah, that's briefly some of the improvements we have in Resource Viewer. We're doing more work here, especially with collapsing, expanding nodes, and that's coming in 0.22.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Milan. I don't know, is there any question regarding Resource Viewers part?
When you're looking at the pod and you see the last event that was in there,
yes.
Is that something? Is that clickable?
Yes,
oh yeah, it is.
That's
okay,
link.
Great.
Yeah, so you can directly go there
to the event.
It takes you to the event. Yes.
Nice. That's excellent.
And you can see the involved object. Oh, I clicked back. I'm sorry. You can see the involved object and start troubleshooting for there. Yeah, in future we may show some other stuff there. So if you have any suggestions or ideas, always open for that. Especially this kind of stuff, because it's really hard to know what's important for each resource type. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Milan.
Sure thing.
Okay, let me now share my screen. There. Okay. So next item is, there is a couple of issues. Felipe and Vikram have been working really hard to approach to a complete solution. Especially this one is related to a bug reported by a user on basically ingress object not visible from Octant UI. So I'd like to please Felipe or Vikram to comment some context and what we are working on for this. Thank you.
Yeah, so basically I would like to do an open discussion. We have like a proposal for a solution. We are both working on similar issues. This one that is on the screen, and the other one is number 2063. Basically, they are the same. There are some incompatibilities between Octant and the API from Kubernetes. So this morning I was talking with Vikram. We are thinking maybe doing some different APIs. Yeah, so to be able to support different APIs, right? So I would like to know what you guys think, if this is a good solution, if not, what could be. But that's what we have in mind.
Yeah, so I think it might have been this issue or a different one. I left a comment. I do think we want to be supporting the different versions of the resources until they fall out of our version support matrix for Kubernetes, essentially. So if you take a look at, is it this issue?
I saw your comment there. I don't know if it's here or it's the another one, but
it's either here or in the other one. But I provided two. So there's the link to our supported version SKU policy, which says we support the current version +2 back, and then there's the deprecation guide from Upstream Kubernetes, which kind of states when things have been promoted from V1 beta to V1, when they are going to be getting removed. And in the case of Ingress, when the Kubernetes main version is at 0.24, or sorry, I put O because I was thinking in Octant terms, but 1.24, that is when we would completely drop support for it in Octant, because that it's no longer two versions back, because for 122, it's by 122, it's removed completely. So, so I do think we want to support multiple versions. I think we want to use this deprecation guide as a reference for what, as basically kind of our source of truth for saying, yes, we support that version, here's why, or no, we don't, here's why, right? Like you're like, you have to upgrade at this point if you want to be able to see that resource. And by following this deprecation guide, it also puts us in a good position where, since folks are going to have to upgrade, basically it puts us in the right upgrade path. So people would not be able to use Octant against an older cluster and see those older resources, but they also wouldn't be able to take those resources they have and move them to the newer version, because it would require them to make changes to their resources and actually do the upgrade process. So that's kind of where I landed on this. I think there might be a couple other issues, or not issues, but resources that we've kind of dropped support for that we might want to go back and add support for. But I think Ingress is the only one we get constant issues on. I think there's 3 total now, as people have upgraded their versions of Octant. Anyway, I encourage people to go read that deprecation guide, as it has some great info about when certain versions of resources are going to be going away.
Okay. Thank you, Wayne.
Yeah. So I like that. I'm just wondering, since this is for users that are running the old versions of Kubernetes, this is a little harder to use. It's a little harder to use Octant, right? So I'm wondering, do we have any data? What's the percentage-wise who is using, 21 or 24 or 18 or any other versions? Do we have any data on that, and how important it is? If we have, how important it is to take care of users that are using very old versions of Kubernetes?
We don't have any data on that, but what I can say is that the folks who have reported their problem with Ingress are not using what I would call very old versions of Kubernetes at all. They're using either one version or 2 versions back, which both still support V1 Beta 1 for Ingress, and will continue to support it until 0.22, like 0.22 or 1.22 for Kubernetes is when it will officially be dropped. So that's going to be fairly soon. But for us as a project, we've stated that we support the current version plus 2 back. So that's on us to ensure that people running 2 versions old of Kubernetes can function when using Octant. I think that's a burden that we took on as a team and decided that was a reasonable thing to say, was 2 versions, current version plus 2 version back. And so it really, I guess, it really doesn't matter what I guess is the end of it, right? Like the work that we I feel very strongly that it is reasonable to say we support the current -2. People don't upgrade their clusters with every single release. In fact, a lot of people intentionally wait for a release. They drag a release very intentionally, and a lot of the cloud providers also intentionally drag their releases. Yeah, I think there's no way around it. We just kind of have to support these things. And honestly, the overhead in supporting it is not really that much. I don't know. It doesn't seem that much. This was something that we explicitly removed support for. So we had it at one point where we were actually supporting both. And the CRDs now have an example of, okay, when we have 2 different versions, what should we show? And CRDs have an example of showing both versions of a resource. Instead of what we used to do was merge them together, and then what you saw was like V1 ingress, but what it actually was V1 beta 1 ingress, and that was confusing to people. So we removed V1 beta, but then that broke people who hadn't updated their ingress resource yet. So following the pattern of CRDs, where we show you the real version and list them, I think is ultimately where we want to end up.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thanks, man, for clarifying that. That's cool.
Yeah. I think that's also the exact same SKU as I used to use Quintana Lens also as another one who used that same SKU of 2 versions, and until the API version isn't supported anymore in Kubernetes. So I think that it's also good. There is precedence for that same SKU in client-side Octant visualization tools. And it makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Scott and Wayne and everyone. Okay, next topic in the agenda. For the planning of the upcoming releases, I've been talking with some of our user community, one of them being Scott, indeed. And I'm just bringing here briefly some of the feature requests, let's say, or some of the issues Scott indeed consider more useful for a future release of Octant. One of them being this one, 1751, the addition of a terminal in Octant. So I don't know if it's called, you could discuss briefly this request, and we could see if what the team thinks about this.
Yeah, I think that overall having the terminal would be a huge thing for kubectl, basically. I think that having that ability to not need to open up the shell, especially now that Octant is an Electron app, would be huge, to be able to not leave the application for things that people want to do kubectl for. I think could be very helpful. Similar to how it exists in some other tooling as well. I think that just not needing to leave the application would be very helpful when you want to run just a simple kubectl command or something like that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I agree here. I think this has come up previously from other folks in the community as well, and I think Sam even it was pretty funny, because like Sam and I were having a discussion about this, and then like someone opened an issue for it, and then some other people commented on it, and it was like the moment we said it out loud, and like a bunch of people were like, yes, we would like to be able to do that. And I think it was something we even considered trying to get in back in like ODOT 19. And it just never made it into the list of priorities. So, it's good to know. I'll make sure it gets moved up in the backlog, just from a community standpoint of people really wanting it, and then we can see which of the next releases it gets planned into.
Cool, thank you. And yeah, there are some other feature requests and some other users who will be participating on this. So I'll be bringing this here for us to discuss. So thank you. And finally, there is here a point on having a sprint goal. I don't know who exactly put it there. So if you could please discuss.
Yeah, so that was added by me. And one of the things that I was interested in trying out, it's something that in various one-on-ones with people from the team, there's a common theme of like people understand that there's a queue of issues to work, but they don't seem to have like something that ties them all together, something that creates kind of a goal for the current sprint. And so I was wanting to kind of work towards, and we don't have to do it here in this meeting, but I wanted to at least start talking about it so that next week when we go to later in this week when we plan our sprint and we go to kind of kick everything off, I want to have a kind of a summary that says, and if people hate this idea, then we won't. But my thought was, it seems like people wanted it based on feedback. So my thought was that as a group, we would come up with kind of a summary of what this release is going to focus on, and be kind of specific about that, and then use that and then establish like 3 key outcomes, like goals for the release, and then use that to guide our planning process when we're putting things into ODOT 2022. Because I think what happens now is we go, oh, well, it'd be nice to fix bugs, and it would be nice to improve CI, and it would be nice to do resource view, and it would be nice to do this. And all of those things do align kind of with like long-term goals in our roadmap. But then what we end up with is this kind of sprint that's like all like doing all of the things a little bit instead of like really like zooming in on one thing and doing that thing really well, right? Like we have the opportunity to kind of take a thing that we really want to improve and just hyper focus on that thing for an entire sprint. And that thing can be whatever we decide as a team based on community feedback and priorities, and like we can decide that, but then making sure that like, hey, this issue, yeah, it'd be nice and it's important, but it doesn't align with kind of our summary and our set goals. And then this would also tie into making sure that releases are landing, like this next release, which is scheduled for July 13th. July 13th is the day we cut the release. And what's there is there, what's not is not, and then we move on to the next release. And so I think having a summary and a focus for the release and a set of goals will also help us not drag releases like we have been in the past, where I'll go, oh, this is important, and we haven't cut a release yet, so let's wait. And now we can say like, hey, yeah, it's important, but also it doesn't fit with the focus and the goals that we've set. So it can wait. Anyway, thoughts, comments, hate it, love it, don't care.
I like that a lot. I feel that, having focused releases will help us, especially on the planning stage. And I think we should do them before we start planning and prioritizing bugs and putting them in our backlog. So I think that will definitely help us be more focused, and also sending the message out to all external stakeholders. This is what's coming out on July 14th, so they know and they are ready for it. So I like that a lot. And I think we should do it before we start moving the issues around.
Ooh, any other thoughts, comments on this? No? Okay, thank you. So final point will be, this is a question from myself, from a conversation that I was having with a user this week. He's facing some issues, listing resources because his user has only permission in a specific namespace. So it looks like that is not an issue anymore for Octant, but my question is more from the Octant architecture point of view, how in general Octant manage namespaces versus cluster-wide resources. I don't know if that's clear enough.
I'll take this one. Just to clarify a little bit, let's break this down a little bit. So by manage, do we mean operations, or are you more interested at the API level? What's happening when we're making these calls to the cluster?
Yeah, probably from the most simple operation will be list, having the ability to list namespaces versus cluster-wide resources. And yeah, second step will be to perform operations on these objects.
Okay, let me pull back up Octant again. I think the best way is just to show this.
Okay.
Oh, all right. I need a cube config. Oh, heads up. The kubeconfig apply part, it doesn't use the YAML editor, so you can't actually browse files for the kubeconfig.
Oh no! All right.
Not
yeah. Thanks for straightening that out.
I'll open an issue for it.
Yeah, I mean, it should be fairly trivial to switch over. All right, so let's get Octant up and running here. Screen. Okay, so this is what Octant looks like when you start up a cluster, and we can even cube, and this is a local cluster, so I could even show my cube config and not really care, right? So here we can show a cluster, and pretty much this is the only thing in my cube config. So it's going to want to throw itself in the default namespace using this local cluster. Now, here on the top right, you're going to see it starts on default because that's what it's going to try. And if it isn't, there are various knobs you can do to force it to be certain namespaces. But assuming that you have access to everything, cluster overview then just becomes this all namespaces. And whether or not this is a good name is debatable. But then you get into this view where now you can see all the non-namespace scoped objects. Typically on a cluster, depending on RBAC permissions, most people won't really have access to this sort of stuff. And if we're going down the path of something that's more locked down, for example, if you are just a user, I don't really see why you would need to see every single cluster role if you're not an admin, which makes sense to me, right? So that's going to be really what Octant is offering here. Now, how does it manage this stuff? Well, let's take a look for an example, right? Like, let's keep going with this cluster role. I have this addressable resolver. I don't know what it does. I could certainly have a delete operation here. These cluster roles are objects like any other Kubernetes object. So I could theoretically update this YAML. And I mean, it's just a role. So it's not, I don't expect it to be connected to anything. And pretty much that's really it in a nutshell. If there are certain objects which have specialized actions, they might be able to be thrown here. Like, for example, well, I think most of these will only have delete. I can't really think of a good example off the top of my head where one of these cluster scoped objects have specific actions to them. Like a good example here would be if we go into maybe not services. Let's find something with an act with a real action, like a deployment. Okay, maybe not deployment, but like if you look at, say, deployment, something that one could expect to see here would be something like rollout, right? Like if you wanted to spin an update to a deployment and slowly roll them out to like maybe half the pods, that could theoretically be an action here. It'd be interesting to see something like that. I think the only ones that we really have are like cron jobs. Maybe there would be stuff on nodes. Let's see. Yeah, so I don't even think we have node operations here. So yeah, so really that's about it. Nodes are also cluster scope, so you can kind of see, like, you can even start like peeling back the infrastructure layer and start seeing things about the actual VMs that your cluster is being hosted on as well. So, but as far as whether or not Octant should be able to manage something like that, that's I would say it shouldn't, but that's up to opinion.
Okay, got you. Thank you very much, Tam. Clear for me. That's helpful. Thank you. Okay, so any additional questions, comments?
Actually, I have one. Sam, you had just brought up the nodes again there, and I know there's been an issue for a long time hanging about adding an action for draining a node. And I didn't know if that's something that's planned or not, having the ability to like cordon or to drain a node, basically. I know that's something that I've been asked by a lot of people that I've pointed towards Octant. Didn't know if that's something that's planned at all.
Yeah, so it is planned, and I think drain is technically, I don't remember which one. No, drain is the one that's not implemented. I think cordon is implemented. I think there are a lot of nuances there. Just simply, it's not just like, oh, start killing all the process on this node and moving it over to the next one. There are things like, oh, what happens if, what should happen if the process doesn't want to stop? Or I don't have the context, actually. I'm not explaining this very well. But there's more, like, it's not just like add an action and let client go do the heavy lifting. There's a lot of tunable parameters to this, which makes it a little tricky to just add a button for it.
Okay, yeah, it has a lot of, if you want it to evict empty dir volumes and things like that, there are a lot of flags to drain for advanced settings.
Right, and it's not necessarily obvious on what is the reasonable default here.
Right, which I guess that would also be something that if the terminal gets put in, that would be something that becomes much easier with just kubectl drain node then. For those things that are more complex, having the easy escape hatch, because draining you could technically do also by editing the YAML, which I've done before, but that's less optimal, I would say, but that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd say like for these type of operations, like my gut instinct is to do it on the command line, just simply because those flags are just much more obvious and much more well documented. Than like, I think this is one of the cases where having a UI might not actually be helpful. That said, we could even create a very specialized view just for this operation. I could definitely see this as a thing, just simply because when this issue was open, I think the implementing stuff like forms were still in a very early state, and we could have a much more guided experience for something like this.
Yeah, I think there's like 5 flags that can be passed into drain that would be the like form in that case. And then the defaults would be what the default is from, like, if you were to do a kubectl drain node. So it wouldn't by default evict empty dirs or wouldn't evict host paths, and things like that. And then it could be just like a checkbox of evict host path, ignore daemon sets, things like that.
Yeah, I could totally see that as a workflow for this feature.
Sure. Okay, well, thank you so much. I don't know if there is not any additional comment or questions. I would like to thank Todd Rosenberg for your feedback. It's really useful for us in the project, and we hope to keep you here engaged with the tool, with the project, the community, and to everyone here. Thank you.
Thank you. See you later.
Any comments? See you later.